Welcome to the fourth branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening.
Ignorance is the biggest threat to any democracy. It is, however, the ignorance of the ignorance which represents the greatest danger to society. It is what turns an ignorant man into a lunatic. Thus lies the danger, the peril even of a man, a community, a state, a country, yes, even a society. John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, said that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all. Indeed, it does. We've seen it, have we not? We've witnessed it. We are all living it, are we not? All men are born ignorant. Many have chosen to stay and live in ignorance. Only a few recognize ignorance is indeed the root and stem of all evil and choose to be ignorant no more. Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the fourth branch program. First, a warning. This program is not suitable for all audiences. I repeat, the content of this program is not for everyone. To find out if it's suitable to you, answer the following two questions. Question 1. Would you entrust your teenage daughter to a non-rapist? Question 2. Would you have a non-pedophile cared for your toddler? Once again, question 1. Would you entrust your teenage daughter to a non-rapist? Question 2. Would you have a non-pedophile cared for your toddler? Your time is up, obviously. If you had difficulty answering either question, this program is not for you. If you answer yes to either or to both questions, this program is definitely not for you. But if both of your answers are absolutely not, this program is catered exclusively to you. You should stick around. It is enlightening, educational, and informative. Join me here on the fourth branch at 10:30 a.m. every Saturday. And every weekday at 2 p.m. This is the fourth branch.
Common sense in a world of chaos.
This program will resume in just a moment.
I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Join me on our next social media broadcast. I apologize. It looks like we did have some audio problems. If you just joined us, you didn't miss anything. For those of you who still stay with us, I thank you for your patience. And we are talking about the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, role in the nation. We mentioned earlier, during the time in which there was no audio, that on Friday, Black Friday that is, the Trump administration released a report which provides information about the fact that there has been a lot of changes to the environment, a lot of changes, man-made changes to the environment. If you recall that Republicans in particular have been very adamant about the fact that there is no such thing as climate change. Ironically, at the time that the report was being released, Donald Trump, the president of the United States, tweeted that, where is the climate change? It is so cold. Ignorance, in fact, is indeed a big threat in the country. The propaganda network, Fox, has been mostly the mouthpiece for the Republican Party to try to deny the very fact that there is climate change, and we, humans, have been the cause of many of such damages done to the environment. Ironically, today, the Trump administration, caught in its own lies, released a report that is damning, a report that contradicts everything Republicans have been peddling in relation to the environment. There is indeed a climate change. Many damages done to the environment are man-made. But instead of alerting the public, instead of taking steps to fix the problem, the Republican administration decided to simply bury the report and hope that nobody pays attention. Today, we are going to show to you what happened when damages are done to the environment. To begin, we'll give you a look at something that we can only see in movies or read in books. Let's take a look.
Since its discovery in the 19th century, dinosaurs have been fascinating the world. Some were so large that their dimensions are hard to believe. Top 10 biggest dinosaurs. Number 10. Giganotosaurus. Like most of the great carnivores, it lived in the Cretaceous period, between 99 and 96 million years in Argentina. It measured 42 feet in length, 13 in height, and weighed 8 tons. His skull was a little more than 4.9 feet. It was so large that it was supposed to feed on Tyrannosaurus-sized prey. However, he had a weakness: speed. Do you see those bulky legs? It is because his femur was larger than his tibia, making him an animal quite heavy and unable to run at great speeds. That is why he is thought to be a predator of ambushes. Number 9. Carcharodontosaurus. Its name means shark-toothed reptile.
The only place now we seen dinosaur is in movies. That's why a lot of Republicans use that as a way to say that, well, those things don't exist. Man-made, they just product of imaginations. And they peddle that message on Fox to the point that you today meet Republicans that pretty much swears that those animals never existed. It is difficult to comprehend how in the world, in this day and age, with that much technology, with that much information at our fingertips, that there would be individuals who would still live in the dark, who would still accept those type of falsehoods propagated by a network whose primary job, by the way, is supposed to educate its audience. How in the world can we as a nation advance or survive if there is a large portion of the population who decide to stay and live in ignorance? Who does it benefit? Why would a network as large as Fox with 100 million viewers decide to peddle falsehoods so blatant that even the most ignorant individual can see through, but yet they decide to accept it, peddle the message around, and continue to believe such? That is at the core of what the nation has been going through in terms of advancement. And that is also the reason that every single Republican candidate for president consider the EPA as their punching bag, because the very first thing that they promise is to get rid of the agency whose primary job is to protect the environment. But in case you think that dinosaurs only existed in movies, take a look at that, the fossil. We have proof at the very least, in case you don't think that it's just product of people's imagination, product of Hollywood. Who invented the fossils? Nobody created those. We discovered them. And even as of date, across the world, in various parts of the world, there has been discovery still continuing of dinosaurs, those large animals. Those are not product of Hollywood. But what's the point of telling you all that? Is there a point to this story? Now, what you're looking at is different fossils of dinosaurs. No, we don't see them around, running around anymore. There is a reason for that. Natural disasters such as flood, earthquake, volcanoes have pretty much taken care of them. That's why they buried. And today we, scientists, paleontologists, mostly have been right hard at work discovering, finding those fossils. Now, what's wrong with the picture? There were those huge animals, and at some point, they no longer exist. The question is why? Any idea why those huge mammals cease to exist? Well, here's a hint: the environment. Now, I've been saying for the past few episodes that we, as constituents, ought to pay very close attention to that particular agency, the EPA. And the reason for that is because, and I mentioned it before, and I will continue to mention it, is the most important agency in the nation. We have other agencies that do very important work. Protect the nation, such as CEA, CIA, FBI, and so on. But those agencies cannot come anywhere close in terms of importance as EPA. That's why sometimes it's almost impossible to understand why any sound-minded individual would find it necessary to even suggest the idea of getting rid of EPA. This is the agency whose primary job is to protect the basic resources that we humans need. Water, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink. Basic necessities to sustain life. We cannot live without water. We cannot live without air. And yet, Republicans exclusively, there has never been any Democrat legislators anywhere at any point in time which ever suggested the idea. The question is, why would the Republicans time and again have this obsession of getting rid of an agency whose primary job is to protect the resources, the basic necessities of life? Why? But the bigger question is, why would the constituent continue to believe that this is not necessary? Now, one reason we know is the fact that most Republicans listen and tune in to stations such as Fox, which peddle those false messages, those misinformation, those disinformation, and believe such, despite the fact that there is irrefutable proof that those words coming out of the mouth of individuals such as Sean Hannity, Fox and Friends, Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Janet Pirro, and so on. It is so obvious that's the case, and yet Republicans constituents continue to believe those type of messages. Today, we're going to show you the importance. First of all, we're going to talk about the environment, the pollution, all the pollutants that have been just thrown into the environment. And we're going to tackle those one at a time in order to show you that the EPA does indeed have the most important role in our lives. The dinosaur no longer exists because the environment was no longer conducive to their lives. As mentioned prior, today across the world, we have a number of sea creatures washing ashore dead because the water has been polluted. And some of them are being killed and being washed ashore. And if that trend continues, sooner or later, there will be no more sea creatures. Just the same way that the dinosaur no longer exists, in the way of the dinosaur, sea creature will cease to exist. And if we extrapolate, we, human species, we too will cease to exist. we are the only living organism which we dub ourselves as superior animal. We supposed to be, we evolve, we think, we debate different issues, we rationalize, we talk. We are the superior animal. And yet, we are probably the only living organism that are so self-destructive. So much for superiority. But in all fairness, I have to lay that problem right at the door of the Republican. As I mentioned earlier, there has never been any Democrat who has taken the side of destroying this agency, the EPA, that is an agency that's trying to clean up the environment, that's supposed to clean up the environment, and making certain that we as a living organism, we can live in an environment that's more or less conducive to our lives. I wrote many weeks ago that Republicans are much dumber than Democrats, and needless to point out what the reaction was. And time and again, every topic that I bring to the surface to talk about, if you take the Republican side of the topic, it is beyond understanding that any individual, any sound-minded individual would want to hand a sharper knife to someone who threatened with a knife to kill you, to stab you. Why would you do that? Someone threatened to stab you with a knife and you turn around and hand a sharper knife to that individual. Why would you do something like that? Unless you're suicidal. It is sometimes impossible for me to get an understanding of that because it's almost like beyond, it's not logical. Now, the way that usually Republicans try to prove that the EPA doesn't have a role in our life is by showing that, hey, everything will take care of itself. There is no climate change. All these things that you're hearing about the environment being damaged are just Democrats are making that up. So every aspect of life is structured in Democrat versus Republican. As such, it is easy for Republicans in general to rally their constituent to support whatever that they try to do because, well, the Democrats don't want it, so you better support me because if you don't, the Democrats are going to do just the opposite. Now, if you are a Republican, has it ever occurred to you that protecting the environment has nothing to do with being Democrats or Republicans? But I'm going to, let me take a short break and I'm going to show you that it is not a Democrat or a Republican issue. It is a human issue. If the environment is no longer conducive to our way of life, it's not just Democrats that are going to die or just Republicans that are going to die. We all on the same boat. As such, it is an issue that should be of concern to everybody. And yet, for reason that's still impossible to understand, Republicans just found out that, well, Democrats have been right about, well, not Democrats, scientists, because those issues have been brought up by scientists to say that we have been causing damage to the environment. Now, Republicans found that's the case. But instead of accepting that fact and working towards a solution, they try to bury that information. It is mind-boggling. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Join me on our next social media broadcast. See you then. Donald Trump did not make the Republicans what they are today, but he helped to expose who they really are. There are several types of pollutions which threaten to end lives as we know it. There is water pollution, air pollutions, lights, sounds, and so on. Today, we're going to talk almost exclusively about the air pollution. And the reason is because, obviously, well, we need air. We breathe. And it so happened that the pollution, that the air pollution is caused by a number of activities that we humans have engaged into. Now, most of the majority of air pollution is caused by the industries, chemical industries that spew those type of impurities in the air. And what does that do in general? Now, you might know that the air that we are referring to is mostly oxygen. That's pretty much what we breathe. We breathe oxygen in, and we, human being, mankind, needs oxygen to live. And that's one of the reasons that scientists has been working aggressively to find other planets, other places, location in the universe that can sustain the kind of life that we have here. It is a big universe, but so far there is just planet Earth that seems to be able to sustain the life that we human live. The air that we need in order to stay alive, the oxygen that we need. Yes, they have found in distant planets that those planets may also have oxygen, water, but so far there is no conversation about those planets being able to sustain the type of life that we have here. Or even if that were to be possible, we don't have a means to get there. So we are stuck on Earth. The only way out of the situation, or the only way, or the only possible solution that we have is to preserve this planet, to preserve the environment. We don't have a choice at this point. Now, for those who continue to argue against that, it is impossible to understand what agenda do they have, what exactly do they have in mind. Because they don't have any other, they don't have an alternative, they don't have a way out of this predicament. We are exactly on the same boat. Now, pollutions, as I mentioned, come from a lot of air pollution in particular, from a number of different things that we do. The automobile that we drive do contribute to pollute the air as well. Trains, planes, almost pretty much every aspect of evolution has contributed somehow to pollute the air. And they have found out because of that, there is a number of illnesses that we have started to suffer. Now, here are a few of the pollutants that pretty much we're not here to have a history of the pollutant, but to give you an idea what's causing this problem and how we can help more or less minimize it or eliminate it altogether if at all possible. Number one, we have this matter they call particulate matter, PM10 and PM2.5. This is a form of pollution that is done, that comes into our life based on a number of particles, whether it's water, gases. They combine dust and dirt and sand, and they produce pollution in the air. Now, this is impossible to eliminate because of the simple fact that, yes, we're going to have dust, we're going to have dirt, we're going to have sand. I mean, those things are there, but they're not really the major culprit in our discussion. Now, we have ozone, or O3. Now, ozone is kind of an interesting pollutant for mankind. There is what I would call a good O3 and a bad O3. Now, the good O3 happen to be this layer that protects us from sun radiation, from the UV, the radiation from the sun. This would be considered good, because without the ozone layer, we probably would not exist. We would be fried by the sun. So the ozone is actually good for us in a sense, because at least it protects us from the sun. But that is called the stratospheric layer of the atmosphere. So it's good for us because it protects us from the sun. But there is also the bad one. That's the one that we find right here in our atmosphere. And that one is actually very bad for us because it causes many problems, especially children and elderly. And people who have lung disease also suffers a great deal if they happen to live in an area where there is ozone. So that's a bad one. So we talk about the O3, which is the sun. So if you hear someone talking about the ozone being good, they only talking about that aspect of the one in the atmosphere that protects us from the sun, and that layer is not within our reach, so we don't have to worry about that. The other type of pollutant is the nitrogen dioxide. Now, that particular pollutant actually does also impact our lungs, because what it does is it inflames our lungs, and people who smoke actually end up having more problem with that type of pollutant in the air. Why? Because it impacts the lungs. And it so happened that a number of activities that we do here, like burning of fossil fuel, burning of coal, burning of oil and gas, all those things contribute a great deal to create nitrogen dioxide, which kill us. Now, it is, as I mentioned, more dangerous to children and elderly, but at the same time to people who have lung disease and smokers. So if you are a smoker and you are exposed to that, you will definitely suffer. You will be impacted faster or much more so by the presence of nitrogen dioxide. And people usually, you may be able to a certain extent know that you may have that problem because it produces very distinct signs such as cough, shortness of breath, tiredness, nausea. Now, even if you were to be removed from those areas that produce that give you that kind of problem, according to experts, you may still continue to have the problem. Your lung may still continue to deteriorate because of the exposure to nitrogen dioxide. Now, there is another pollutant in the air that we humans cause. It is carbon monoxide. And we have no way of knowing that particular pollutant is dangerous, and yet it is very difficult to detect. It doesn't have any smell, it doesn't have any color. It is dangerous, it kills. You may notice that in your house, in your apartment, that there is a small little box whose job is to detect that pollutant, because sometimes you may have it in your place and you may not even know that, because as I mentioned, it doesn't give you any sign. There is no sign for you to know that this problem exists. But fortunately, technology gives us the ability to know, because of this little bug that can detect it. Then if it detects carbon monoxide in the area where you live, it will sound an alarm, and that will tell you that to get the hell out of the place, because it kills. And there have been a lot of instances of people who died of exactly that problem. And the reason for that is if you are in a place where there is carbon monoxide rather, you will find that you're going to have shortness of breath, because what it does, it deprives your blood of oxygen. It deprives your heart of oxygen. It deprives your brain, the vital organ that needs oxygen. It deprives them of that. So you kind of almost feel like you're dying of asphyxiation. So you feel like you're going to suffocate. You're losing consciousness. You start feeling some sort of tightness in your chest. That's what it does. Again, fortunately, there is an equipment that's available to help us know that this pollutant that's in the environment is in the area where you're at. And if you don't do anything, mainly to evacuate the area, you will suffer a certain death. Now, you may have seen, if you've been in a hospital suffering of certain lung problem, you may have seen that the first thing that when you get to a hospital, you have shortness of breath, or you're depleted of oxygen, which is the important element for us mankind to live on. You may have found out that you need that. So automatically at the hospital, what they do, they put an oxygen mask for you so that you can get some oxygen. Because usually what that means is you cannot breathe properly. You cannot absorb the amount of oxygen that your vital organ needs for whatever reason. For instance, if you lose blood, that will happen. If you were in an accident and you lose consciousness, then you most likely may need to be injected oxygen. And what they do automatically, they put a mask for you so that amount of oxygen that your body needs, that you cannot get in, because your vital organ, the minute it is deprived of oxygen, it starts shutting down. Your heart needs oxygen. Your brain needs oxygen. Your blood needs oxygen to distribute to different parts of your body. So if you deprive of oxygen for a long period of time, you will eventually die. Now, here is the good news. All the oxygen that we need, assuming that we're in good health, is right there in the environment. It is there available to us. We don't have to worry about it. You may have noticed, however, that some individuals, they are on the street with a small little tank that they carry or they're dragging behind them, which is an oxygen tank. Now, why in the world someone would be on the street in the open where there is plenty of oxygen? Why would they need to be carrying an oxygen tank? It is because they have lung problem and their lung cannot absorb the oxygen that they need at a speed, at a level that their body needs. So the oxygen tank, the oxygen that's being inserted into their system, is to allow their major organs such as heart and brain to get that amount of oxygen and be able to function, because as I mentioned earlier, your bloodstream needs oxygen. So because you cannot absorb the amount of oxygen that you need, so now we have a way of providing that into your body. We were made in such a way that we can get the oxygen that we need. But once you start having those type of illnesses, lung disease, all of a sudden, now you have this difficulty of absorbing oxygen, which is readily available for you. Now you have to resort to some help, which is the machine that you see that some individuals are carrying around. So we breathe oxygen. We need oxygen. We cannot live without oxygen. If we cannot get it from the environment, we have to have a way to make certain that we get it into our body. Now, it's a few people here and a few people there that you see on the street carrying the oxygen tank. Now, if you can visualize the idea of the environment is no longer conducive for us to breathe, to get to absorb the oxygen that we need, what do you think is going to happen? We are not going to be able to live, because guess what? We need the oxygen. And if the environment is bad enough that we cannot, our body cannot accept the oxygen because it's so polluted, even if we absorb it, we will be absorbing it with impurities, then we have a problem, right? And that is the role of the E.P.A. to prevent that problem from happening. I'll be right back. Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. every Saturday.
And every weekday at 2 p.m. This is the 4th branch.
Common sense in a world of chaos.
This program will resume in just a moment.
In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies, presenting to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a recent survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance, not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. Under the Obama administration, there were a number of rules, guidelines, regulations that were proposed in order to strengthen the Environmental Protection Agency. The main purpose of those rules, the main purpose of those guidelines was to make certain that our environment is not destroyed by our own actions. The biggest culprits to the damages being done to the environment are the industries. Chemical industries, industries that deal with toxic material, radioactive type of material. And one of such rule would have slapped a very hefty fee on any industry that dump their material waste in what we call river stream. Nowhere where there could be water, whether especially downstream, or there is well, or there is any possibility of sources of water, industries that produce those type of waste were banned to do so. So their job was to make certain that those wastes are properly disposed of in order to prevent those chemical, those radioactive material from ever getting into our system, the water that we drink or the air that we breathe. Now, there is nothing democratic about that. You clean your property when it's dirty. You get rid of whatever would cause a health hazard, don't you? If you find that there is something that can cause some discomfort in your own property, you call the expert, an expert. If it has to do with insects, rodent, or what have you, you call the terminator. Because you want to live in an environment which is conducive to the at least a normal life, where you don't have to worry about if you lay down, a rodent will just jump on you. or if you have food on the stove, that other creatures would crawl into them. Those are common sense. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. All you have to do to understand that the role of the EPA is at a much larger scale. The EPA doesn't come to your house to do those tasks. They're responsible for the nation, to rid our environment of elements that are nuisance to our health, of elements that can cause harm to our health. That is the purpose of the EPA. When it was created, at the time that it was created, the Nixon administration sent a proposal to the houses at that time asking for $4 billion. The equivalence of which is probably at this point close to $40–60 billion. But Congress and the Senate did not have any problem whatsoever. And the reason is because at the time, it seems, most of those legislators were more concerned about the well-being of the country, the well-being of the constituent. So they were all okay with the idea of putting more money to clean the environment, to preserve the environment in order to, one, sustain lives, but most importantly, to ward off illnesses that are currently here in our atmosphere because of the type of activities we have been engaged into. The Environmental Protection Agency should not be an agency that is considered as a football between different political parties. It is way too important. Our way of life depends on it. Much the same way today we have no more dinosaurs because, well, the environment was not conducive to their lives, to their way of lives. The same way today we have a number of sea creatures washing off the shore dead because the water is being polluted at a speed that those creatures cannot sustain. It is as possible for us, mankind, to start dropping dead along the way because the environment is no longer conducive to our way of life. It's being polluted at a pace that's never before seen. Why would any sound-minded individual oppose the idea of having an agency clean up the environment and sustain such environment so that we can have a better way of life? Why would that be? Why would it become a political matter for the Environmental Protection Agency to make certain that our environment is protected at all costs? Because failure to do so is to put a time to our very existence. Now, granted, the dinosaurs didn't have an agency. They couldn't, could they? They could not predict flood. They could not be warned of volcanoes or disasters that struck this planet. They did not have any scientists to tell them about how things would become. But we, mankind, do have all the necessary tools, not only to warn us of danger, but also to inform us of what action we can take in order to preserve our way of life, and at the very least to make it a little bit easier. But instead, we have a party, a political party, for reasons that are baffling, is determined, its members are determined to put an end to our way of life. They have such ways of explaining why they want to curtail the E.P.A, its activities. They have a way of explaining why they want to handcuff the agency whose job is to protect our environment. And they are all engaged in a campaign of misinformation in order to debate an issue as important as the environment and turn it into a political matter. The environment is not a political matter. The environment is the only one, this environment is the only one we have as superior animal. We should at least have the wherewithal to understand the importance of protecting that environment, not destroying it. Most living creatures seek for ways to live, to protect themselves against predators, against nature, against disasters. They have developed abilities that help them survive, stay alive. We know that because we've observed them. And yet we, the superior animal, seems determined to destroy our own way of life, making it, well, politics as usual. In our next episode, we will talk about water pollution. In which we will continue to the conversation about why now our water, being so polluted now, cannot even sustain lives. At the end of this program, we will show you even the most dreadful part of our environment being polluted. It's not even any of those things that we're talking about. Yes, we will get sick. Yes, some of us will die. But even worse will happen to us. So pollution is not a welcome idea. And the E.P.A, the Environmental Protection Agency, its role is the most important in the nation. And we, as citizens of this country, ought to do everything humanly possible, not only to protect the agency, but to make certain that it has the resources to do the job for which it exists. It's not a matter of Democrat versus Republican. It is not. Wayne Dwyer said that the highest form of ignorance is to reject something you don't know anything about. And it has been pretty much determined, especially in the Republican circle, to reject the idea that there has been climate change and we, humans, have been doing so many things to damage the environment. And yet we refuse to take responsibility for our actions. And the latest has been mind-boggling. An administration whose job is to make life better for its citizens, instead has decided to go by the way of burying information which clearly shows we have been on a path of destruction. Yes, the same administration that has been saying there is no climate change, the same administration, the same political party that has been arguing against the idea, against the possibility of the idea, that same party has found out beyond any shred of a doubt that indeed we are responsible of the damage that is caused to the environment. At this point, there is no argument. The way forward is to clean the environment. The way forward is to preserve the environment. Failure to do so will make it almost impossible, if it's not just impossible, for future generations to even live a life here on this planet. As I mentioned earlier, at the end of this program, or the presentation of the E.P.A. rule, we will show you what is worse awaiting humankind, what is worse than death awaiting mankind, our species, if we continue on that path. I hope whether you are a Republican, specifically if you are a Republican, to realize that your argument against Democrat is senseless, useless, suicidal, and it is time you drop your political hat and join the rest of society to fight against a common enemy, those polluting our environment. I'll be right back.
Join me here on the fourth branch at 10:30 a.m. every Saturday. And every weekday at 2 p.m. This is the fourth branch.
Common sense in a world of chaos.
This program will resume in just a moment.
thank you for spending the time with me and hope you have a wonderful rest of the weekend. I do invite you to join me again on our next program, which is on Monday at 2 p.m. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of the week. Have a good afternoon. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Join me on our next social media broadcast. See you then.
The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.